Pepsi-Cola hits a spot. Tastes so tangy, and it's got bounce, 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 bounce.
Delicious Pepsi-Cola, your smartest cola buy, presents your favorite program, Exciting Counterspy.
Washington calling David Harding, Counterspy. Washington calling David Harding, Counterspy.
Harding, Counterspy, calling Washington.
United States Counterspies, especially appointed to investigate and combat the enemies of our country, both at home and abroad.
Tonight, the case of the Psychic Secrets, a thrilling counter-spy report to the American people, presented each Tuesday and Thursday by delicious Pepsi-Cola.
Say, want to have more fun? Want more bounce? Then get that drink, that tasty drink, Pepsi. That's the cola drink with more bounce to the ounce.
Big, big Pepsi hits a spot. 2 full glasses, and it's got bounce, 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 bounce. Just say Pepsi for that Pepsi bounce.
Now go get Pepsi for that Pepsi bounce.
More bounce to the ounce, more bounce to the ounce.
Go get Pepsi for that Pepsi bounce.
More bounce to the ounce in Pepsi. More bounce to the ounce in Pepsi.
Got your Pepsi? Then now to Counterspy.
In the upstairs living room of a Washington mansion overlooking the Potomac River, a middle-aged woman reclined on a couch, eyes closed, hands folded. Standing behind her was a dark, distinguished-appearing man whose rich, deep voice seemed to fill the quiet room.
This is our 6th consultation, Mrs. Wells. This evening we review our progress.
Yes, Marlowe.
Now, in the past, you have answered all my questions truthfully. You've kept nothing from me about your husband's personal life, Mrs. Wells?
Nothing.
And no one knows I come here tonight?
No one, Marlowe.
You've never mentioned our consultations to anyone?
I haven't.
Now to the most pertinent questions. Do you fully understand what I've explained to you before? That your abnormal fear of high places is caused by a neurotic trauma?
Yes. The memory of seeing my sister fall off that mountain cliff.
Exactly, Mrs. Wells.
I was never terrified by height before Anne died.
And you realize now that you must strengthen your defense mechanism? Combat your phobia?
I've been trying, Marlowe, but I still
But you have been trying. That is important. Now, let's see how well you do in this evening's test.
No, please. Can't we wait
Now,
until...
Mrs. Wells, believe me. As your psychic advisor, I know you're quite prepared to meet the test. First, we'll wind the Soto box. Its soft, compelling tones will aid us in the full release of your psychic blocks.
It's very soothing, Marlowe.
Yes, soothing and relaxing. Relaxing, soothing. Let your mind drift. Drift as a cloud swept softly across the heavens. As a cloud, softly drifting.
Softly drifting.
Relax. Relax, Mrs. Wells, and drift. Now, you will do as I suggest.
Yes, Marlowe.
Rise, my dear.
Rise.
Come with me across the room to the French doors.
Yes, Marlowe.
Now out on the balcony.
Out on the balcony.
And across the balcony, toward the gathering storm in the sky and the water below.
Marlowe,
Come, my dear, to the edge of the balcony. You've no need to fear. I am with you. You're really afraid of high places such as this balcony because you have a deep-seated desire to destroy yourself. Now, you will stand here on the edge until I count 10.
Marlowe, I can't.
Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4.
Marlowe, don't leave me here alone.
6.
Marlowe.
7.
I'm getting dizzy. Come back. The balcony's swaying. I'll fall. I can't help myself. I'll fall.
I'll knock with 2 points, Mr. Harding. That should get me off the Schneider.
It should, Mr. Peters, except for this.
5
on your heart run, 9 and 8 on your spade run. You know.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. That completes the triple Schneider.
Oh, I knew I forgot to bring something when I came over here to your apartment tonight, Dave.
What?
My own cards.
Total up the sad news while I get the phone.
I'll need an adding machine for this one.
Hello?
Mr. Harding, this is Captain Fergus of the Washington Police,
What is it, Captain Fergus?
reporting a violent death. Mrs. Stephen S. Wells.
The wife of the advisor to the Economics Planning Division.
She fell or leaped from the second floor balcony of their home in the Potomac View section. The body was discovered 15 minutes ago by a servant who returned to the house after an evening off. Mr. Wells is in California.
All right, Captain. I'll notify him. Then I'm coming out to the Wells home.
Mrs. Wells had probably been out on that balcony up there 1,000 or more times. Funny that she tripped this one time, Chief.
Could have been suicide, Peter. The same as Claude Reardon's wife.
Why do you mention Mrs. Reardon, Dave?
Well, Mrs. Reardon was alone in the house that evening. Her husband was out of town, servants off for the evening. The same as Mrs. Wells. One kills herself with a gun. The other jumps to her death on those rocks.
Mm-hmm. When people commit suicide, they usually make sure they're alone.
That's right. But the tie-up that interests me is that both women's husbands hold important government posts.
Dave, this is one time that I think you're bending the long arm of coincidence a little too far.
No, Peters. Just bending over backwards to leave no angle unexplored.
Faster, Humphrey. I should be at Ambassador Duran's lawn party by now.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Ashton, but the traffic's kind of thick today.
Blast the traffic, man. I will not keep the ambassador waiting.
All right, ma'am.
Faster!
But, Mrs.
But
Ashton...
me no buts, Humphrey. Do as I say. What's that?
That, ma'am, is a police siren.
All right, pull over to the curb.
We'll do no such thing. Keep driving, Humphrey.
Over to the curb, I said.
Humphrey, you blithering idiot. You never could drive. That stop of yours knocked me right off the seat.
Well, it wasn't my fault, ma'am. That police officer cut in front of me.
Well, get that officer's number. I'll have him broken. This is what comes from government by bureaucracy. Things were not like this when Grover Cleveland piloted our ship of state. I shall speak to the powers that be about this.
I'm sorry your feathers were ruffled, Vera.
David Harding!
You should have stopped when the officer first told you.
David Harding, you don't mean to tell me you saw all that and stood by.
I not only saw it, Vera, I arranged it. How's my darling?
At this moment, your darling is very angry and very late for Ambassador Duran's party.
Well, I'll only keep you a moment. Now, I arranged our meeting this way because I didn't want anyone to see us together.
Why not?
Because I need your help, secretly. Vera, you're considered the big wheel of the Washington social world.
Considered is hardly the word, David, according to the press, and I quote, "The Capitol merry-go-round spins on the little finger of Mrs. Vera Ashton."
Mm-hmm.
Now, what about my helping you?
It's about the deaths of Mrs. Reardon and Mrs. Wells. Now, you knew both women, Vera.
Of course, they attended numerous functions of mine.
Well, I'd like you to find out everything you can about those two women and see what reasons there might have been for suicide. Will you do that for me?
David Harding, you know I'd do anything in the world for you.
Well, I want you also to see if there's any reason why Mrs. Wells or Mrs. Reardon might have been murdered.
Ah, here it is, Irene. Wells, Agnes C. Services at 10 a.m. Crystal Chapel, Interment, Tarleton Hill Cemetery. Request flowers be omitted. Oh, what a shame. And I was planning to send a large wreath with the words Bon Voyage across the top.
That's not funny, Marlowe. You murdered that woman just as surely as if you'd pushed her off the balcony.
Don't look now, darling, but your sense of humor is slipping. Being the former social secretary to so many prominent Washington women has twisted your sense of value.
I still put a value on human life.
And the money I pay you, too, eh?
Marlowe, I don't want the money anymore. I'm getting out of this whole rotten thing.
And what about your dossier on Mrs. Ralph Harmon?
I'm not giving you that data.
Oh, yes, you are. You're giving it to me right now.
Get your hands off me. Let go.
You're telling me everything I want to know about Mrs. Harmon. And you'll dig up every particle of dirt on every other foolish, neurotic woman I ask for.
No.
If you don't, Irene, you'll find yourself fulfilling your own deep-seated wish for death.
Harding.
David, this is Vera Ashton. I think I have something.
Hold on a minute, Vera. I want Peters in on this phone call. Peters, get on the extension.
Right.
Go ahead, Vera.
According to their closest friends, Mrs. Wells and Mrs. Reardon were both neurotic. Mrs. Reardon had a deathly fear of guns, Mrs. Wells of height.
And one died by gunshot, the other by a fall.
Both becoming victims of their own phobias.
It could be that someone played on their neurotic condition.
Beginning to look as if you're right in bending over backwards for an angle, Mr. Harding.
Yes, Peters.
Whatever are you two talking about?
Nothing. Go ahead, Vera.
Do you wish me to continue buzzing around for you?
Oh, by all means, Vera. You made wonderful progress. Let's see what else you can dig up.
Keep your eyes closed, Mrs. Harmon. Relax. Let yourself sink down into the sofa. Tonight, all your fears will be dispelled forever.
I'm so grateful to you, Marlowe.
My only wish is your peace of mind. Now, you've told me everything I need to know about your family, about your husband, and his work in the government.
Yes, Marlowe.
Then you're prepared for your test, Mrs. Harmon. Now then, we'll wind the soda box. Isn't that soothing?
Yes, very.
Let it lull and caress your being. Let it soothe and quiet your troubled mind. Relax, Mrs. Harmon. Relax. And drift as a cloud across the heavens. Drift. Drift. Now, rise from the couch and follow me across the room.
Follow you across the room.
We'll open the door to your clothes closet. walk into the closet, Mrs. Harmon.
I can't go in there. I'll suffocate.
I'll be right here, my dear. You'll only have to stand in there while I count 10. In 10 seconds, you will no longer fear dark, cramped places. Go ahead, Mrs. Harmon.
All right. As long as you'll be nearby.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
I feel as if the walls were closing in on me.
8, 9,
10. Marlowe, you closed me in. Let me out. Let me out. Oh, for heaven's sake, let me out. I'll die in here. Please let me out. I'll die.
Say, Maestro, play us something brighter now. It's Pepsi-Cola time.
Go get Pepsi for that Pepsi bounce. More bounce to the ounce in Pepsi.
Ah, what rhythm. That beat goes right to your feet. You feel that bounce? Uh-huh. Do you? Uh-uh. Well, how about a Pepsi? That'll give you more bounce. Delicious Pepsi-Cola with more bounce to the ounce. With Pepsi Bounce, you feel so live, your feet want to dance and jig and jive. You feel so fresh with that Pepsi Bounce, you have more fun. You can even get more done.
It's a great drink, Pepsi, for everyone.
Oh, you can't top that Pepsi Bounce. That tang, that delicious taste.
Uh-huh, that's right. A warm day. Pepsi, cold and long. Brother, that's it.
That's why I say, when you want real refreshment at work or at play, when you want something tasty any time of day, better get that Pepsi.
Pepsi-Cola hits the spot. Tastes so tangy, and it's got bounce, 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 bounce. Just say Pepsi for the Pepsi bounce.
Now go get Pepsi for that Pepsi bounce.
More bounce to the ounce, more bounce to the ounce.
Go get Pepsi for that Pepsi bounce.
More bounce to the ounce in Pepsi. More bounce to the ounce in Pepsi.
And now, back to Counterspy.
Well, Vera, do you have any information for me?
David, I have an idea. I've grabbed the brass ring. There's a woman named Irene Stokes, a social secretary by profession. In the past 5 years, she's held positions with many Washington matrons, including
Mrs. Wells and Mrs. Reardon.
Yes, and she's now secretary to a man named Marlowe.
Marlowe.
He just uses the last name, Marlowe, no first name. He's become quite a fad in Washington society. He calls himself a psychic advisor.
Well, Vera, did you find out if either Mrs. Wells or Mrs. Reardon
Ever sought out Marlowe for psychic advice? I checked on that, David. Not to anyone's knowledge. But most women keep such things to themselves.
Yes, I know. Oh, excuse me.
Peters at headquarters to David Harding.
Harding.
Chief, a call just came in from the Washington police. Mrs. Ralph Harmon has been found dead of a heart attack in the clothes closet of her bedroom.
Oh, my.
You know who her husband is?
Yes, Peters. Ralph Harmon's on the Defense Material Purchasing Board.
Circumstances were the same as in the other deaths. Mrs. Harmon was alone in the house. Her husband was out of town.
All right, Peters. I'm on my way back to headquarters.
David, it just occurred to me. Irene Stokes at one time was Mrs. Harmon's social secretary, too.
Oh, Vera, there's no doubt about it. When you latched onto Irene Stokes, you certainly did grab the brass ring.
Well, I fixed a drink for you, too, Irene. A final toast to Mrs. Harmon.
I don't want it.
Now, don't sit there with that silly, glum look on your face. It's still office hours, you know. Answer the phone.
Hello?
This is Mrs. Vera Ashton. I should like to come in to consult with Marlowe.
Just a moment, please. It's Mrs. Vera Ashton. about a consultation.
Vera Ashton? Oh, that's a lucky windfall. That old dame knows every important person in Washington. Bring up the phone. Hello, Mrs. Ashton. This is Marlowe. I understand you wish a consultation.
Yes, I have a problem. I'd like to see you as soon as possible.
Tomorrow morning at 10?
That would do just fine. Thank you so much, Marlowe.
Not at all, dear lady. The pleasure is all mine. There. Now we'll start the Soto box again, Mrs. Ashton. Relax, just as you've done on your other visits here. Relax and talk freely.
Marlowe, I still don't trust anyone. I still think they're all trying to poison me.
You mustn't think about that now. Just relax.
But you explained to me it's only an obsession due to my husband's accidental poisoning. Why do I still mistrust everyone?
Dear lady, you must talk about everybody, everything you know, everything that has been told to you. Come, Mrs. Ashton, relax and talk. Talk.
What did he have you talk about today, Vera?
Well, David, I led him on by mentioning that I dined last week with several senators and their wives.
He went for the bait, of course.
Ah, like a barracuda. I suppose there's no doubt now what Marlowe's game is, eh, David?
Not the slightest.
Then you can step in now and arrest that monstrous man and his secretary.
Not just yet, Vera. When I take Marlowe and Irene Stokes in, I want positive proof of the other game they play. The murder game.
You're positive of that, Irene?
Yes, Marlowe. I just found out tonight. I told you there'd be trouble someday.
Just leave everything to me, Irene. I promise you that after tonight, there'll be no trouble.
Marlowe, I don't understand. Why did you come out here to my house this time of the night? I have an appointment at your office in the morning.
I decided that this would be a more propitious time.
But
you wish to be cured of your neurosis about being poisoned, don't you?
Oh, yes, of course.
Then tonight you'll meet the test I have prepared for you. Sit in this chair, please.
Yes. Very well.
Well, it's fortunate your servants are off for the evening. It'll make everything easier. There. The Soto box is wound. Now, listen to its soothing tones, Mrs. Ashton. Let them lull you. Quiet your disturbed mind. Relax, dear Mrs. Ashton.
Relax.
Relax, and drift as a cloud softly swept across the heavens. Drifting, softly, softly, drifting. Now you will do as I suggest.
Yes, Marlowe.
That bottle I just placed on the table next to you contains tinted water. As I count 10, you will drink it.
No.
Only tinted water, Mrs. Ashton.
People have been trying to poison me.
It's only in your mind. Once you drink that liquid, you will be free from fear forever. Now, by the time I count 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Marlowe, you stopped. Why?
You've given quite a performance, Mrs. Ashton.
Performance?
Your husband didn't die of poisoning. You lied.
Why, of all, how dare you
Tonight,
accuse
Miss Stokes found out how your husband really died. In a car crash years ago. What's your game, Mrs. Ashton?
Game? I don't know what you mean.
Well, you may as well tell me. It's the last thing you'll ever tell anyone.
What?
In my business, murder becomes a necessary type of insurance.
Then you did kill Mrs. Harmon and those other women.
Oh, so that's what you were after, eh? Yes, I killed them. Or rather, talked them into killing themselves. With you, it'll be somewhat difficult. The liquid in this bottle isn't tinted water, but poison. I knew you wouldn't drink it of your own free will, so I'll just have to force it down your ugly old throat.
Oh, no, you won't, Marlowe.
David Harding!
Harding! Come back here, Marlowe!
He's gone out on the terrace. He'll get away.
He won't get far, Vera.
Stop, Marlowe. Stop or I fire.
See what I mean, Vera? My men were stationed outside.
You and your agents were nearby all the time.
I had an idea Marlowe would come out here tonight after we made sure that Irene Stokes told him the truth about how your husband died.
You let her know the truth?
That's right. She was picked up by my agents right after she passed the information on to Marlowe.
Well, of all the confounded, blasted, dirty tricks.
Easy, Vera. Don't get your feathers ruffled.
Don't you realize that man almost killed me? Well, why didn't you warn me?
I wanted Marlowe to confess, so I had to be sure you'd give a legitimate performance.
David Harding, if you ever ask me to help you again,
Yes, Vera?
I'll probably be the same old fool and say yes.
Now, here's a trick in arithmetic. It's very simple. Listen. That's 1 glass of Pepsi-Cola. That's a second glass of Pepsi-Cola. 2 glasses, but 1 bottle. 1 bottle, but 12 ounces. That's the big Pepsi bottle. 2 full glasses, twice as much of the finest cola in any bottle. So why take less?
How's in your refrigerator? Plenty of tangy Pepsi getting nice and cold for you? You should buy it by the carton, and it costs even less that way.
But don't forget this. Away from home, too. Be sure to ask for Pepsi and get that Pepsi bounce.
Big Pepsi hits a spot. 2 full glasses and it's got bounce, 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 bounce. Just say Pepsi for that Pepsi bounce.
Now go get Pepsi for that Pepsi bounce.
More bounce to the ounce, more bounce to the ounce.
Go get Pepsi for that Pepsi bounce.
More bounce to the ounce in Pepsi. More bounce to the ounce in Pepsi.
Better get that Pepsi.
Tune in every Tuesday and Thursday, same time, same station, to Counterspy. Listen on Thursday for the exciting Case of the Frozen Fortune.
In the heart of an alpine glacier lay hidden a secret worth millions. One man waited 32 years for those millions, but the glacier revealed another unsuspected secret. Murder. For the strange facts of an amazing case, listen on Thursday to
Case of the Frozen Fortune on Counterspy. Tonight's Counterspy program originated in New York and was directed by Leonard L. Bass, dramatized by Edward Adamson, and featured Don McLaughlin and Mandel Kramer, with music by Jesse Crawford. Don Hancock speaking. Counterspy is a Phillips H. Lord production for Pepsi-Cola. Enjoy some delicious Pepsi tonight.